everybody, and welcome back to Casey Arms Workshop. In this video we're going to be making a set of fire irons, or a set of irons for a fireplace, and it will be a poker, a shovel, a rake, a broom, and we're also going to include a mulling iron, which is a very old and traditional type of iron that you heat in the fire for heating a drink such as a hot toddy. So here I have some parts cut out on the bench that are going to become the components that will make up the set. This is 3/8 inch rod, mild steel, and these will be the shafts or the long part of all of my tools. This is 1/2 inch mild steel. It will be the upright or the stand for the tools to hang on. And these two pieces are 1/4 inch by 1 inch flat mild steel, and those I will forge into the feet for my stand. And then I also have a short piece of 1/2 inch round mild that will be the cross member for all of the fire tools to hang on. So I'll take you out to the blacksmith shop real quick and show you the basket weave part. So the basket weave handles on these fire tools will consist of 6 pieces of 1/4 inch mild steel, 5 inches long. And then I have a short piece that's 2 inches. I have 1 inch sticking out and 1 inch into the center of this to hold the pieces on the outside in a circular configuration like that when I forge weld it. So I'll forge weld both ends of this where you see the polished steel. I've got it all cleaned up for forge welding. The piece that's on the inside is also polished. And once that's all forge welded together, then I'll just trim off this little bit of excess. But that was an easy way for me to keep them arranged. And then I've wrapped each of these bundles in 2 pieces of stainless steel wire, because that stainless steel should not melt and adhere to my forge welds. And I'll be using some good old made in USA Iron Mountain flux for sticking these ends together. And the process is pretty simple. Once I forge weld these ends together, I'll then draw them out. One end will be attached to the long 3/8 rod. That is my fire tool. The other end will be forged into a point and then into a hook to hang on the stand. And the rest I'll explain as I go along. So I've already got a nice fire going, and I'm going to start forge welding some ends together. Taking a very slow heat to make sure that the heat gets all the way to the middle of this cluster. And once it does warm up a little, go ahead and get some flux on it. Alright, that looks good to me. So now we're going to switch to this other end. Got to make sure this is sticking out 1 inch. There we go. So now we're ready to flux that. This is the second end of the first piece. So that first weld looks really good, but I've just made a long practice, so I'm always doing a second one. So we're actually going to use for the second coat some borax and just put a nice light coat all the way around. See how that turns to glass basically. Alright, to the vise to wire brush. Alright, so here are our ones that still need to be welded, and here is our first one that we have already welded. See, it's already got a little spiral going just from me twisting it as I welded. But as I say, these are going to be trimmed off. They were just a placeholder, but we've got these ends solid now. So that's what will become our basket weave pattern later on. Alright, so here are all of our handles with the forge weld completed. And these are now ready for me to trim off the placeholder rod that I had in the center. And then I'll hammer both of these ends down, one to a point and one to a 3/8 of an inch with a scarf, which is like a one-sided taper. Alright, so you can see how it's becoming a solid piece. That one has a little bit of offset, but we'll get another forge weld on it. And this end, you can see it squeezed together nicely. So we're ready to heat and draw these ends out now. Alright, so this thick end will eventually be tapered to accept the long shaft for our tool, and this end will be bent into a hook for our tool to hang on the stand. Alright, so you can see that all of our clusters that we started out with this morning, we now have forge welded together at both ends. One end hammered into a point, the other end hammered down to 3/8 round stock to match our handle material, or rather our shaft material. And so the last step we're going to do on these is do a groove or a shoulder all the way around the top, and that'll let us stretch that hook out a little further to make it easier to curl. You can see that's starting to give us a nice groove there. I'm going to get another heat on it. I'm getting closer. I think one more heat will get it. Alright, so this is what we're looking for. You see the little step down there and a nice long taper. That'll make it a lot easier to make our hook. So this is the end that we're going to weld to the long shaft for our tool itself, and this will be the hook that hangs on the stand. We have our fire poker handle, our fire shovel, our fire rake, our broom, our mulling iron, and then we've got one basket weave blank made up for the stand. So that's it, 6 of them. That was a full day of work right there. You can see this one we don't have hammer to a point because it will go in the stand, centrally located. So good morning, day 2 of the fireplace set. I'm out here in the blacksmith shop. I've already got the forge lit, and we've got all of our pieces prepped for the next step. So here are our 6 pieces of 1/4 inch rod, 5 inches long, clustered together, forge welded down on both ends, and as you can see, I've cut a taper on the end of this, and that taper is what will attach to the long pieces, which this is 3/8 inch rod that I've also cut to a taper, so those will just overlap, and that will be our forge weld called a scarf weld. So here's our pieces that are scarfed for the first forge weld. We have to heat them to forge welding heat, overlap the two like so, and then tap it to stick the forge weld together, and then we'll probably do a second forge weld just to ensure that everything is stuck really good. So our pieces are getting warm. We're going to go ahead and wire brush and flux. So I want to make sure that surface right there is super clean, and then Get a nice coat of flux on it, like so. And back in the fire. Same with this other piece. And back in the fire. So I'm constantly rolling the metal in the fire so it heats evenly all the way around. And right there, I had that little tip of the scarf that I wanted to make sure went down. It's looking better. I want to try to thin this down a tiny bit to make it look more even. Alright, so straighten things up a little and clean that while it's still hot. So there we go. Number one down. I'm going to say a little prayer and do this 5 more times. Okay, a few hours later, and we got them all stuck with a little bit of cussing and crying. But all of our forge welds look good. Everything's held tight. Didn't burn any of our tips off. So now we're ready to start shaping the other end of all of our tools. And if you notice, one is much longer because it's going to be a rake. So I think I'll hammer that one out first. And it's basically just going to be flattened and turned at a 90 degree. And then I will do our poker next, which will be folded after it's pointed and forge welded, and so it'll have a point forwards and backwards, like a classic fire poker. And then over here I've got a piece of sheet steel cut out for our shovel. And we'll flatten the end of the rod, drill 2 holes, and rivet this in place. And then our mulling iron will come later, and I'll show you how we do that. Alright, here we go. So next we're doing the poker, which is going to be hammered to a point first. Alright, just finishing this tip, nice and pointed. So I'm going to get one more heat to straighten it out. You can see how it's like a pike. It's for grabbing a log and rolling it towards you. So this is for the shovel, so all I've got to do is flatten a section at the end to put some rivets through to hold our shovel handle on. Alright, so this will be the handle for the broom. which means that we need to make a large knob on the end of it. So we're going to do that by upsetting it in the vise. So our broom has been trimmed considerably shorter than all the other tools because the length of our bristles will make it even out to the same. See how it's swelling out some. So we're going to have to do that several times. I'm just going to get one more heat and round the end of this some. And that's what we're looking for, is a nice swell to wire our broom straw around to make sure it won't come off of here. We have our handle all ready for the last tool, which is called a mulling iron. And it's an iron for heating up in the fire to heat alcoholic drinks usually. And these are common in taverns in Revolutionary War era. And I just thought it'd be a cool thing to include in this set. So I've got a piece of 1-inch round mild steel, nice and warm. And we're going to draw the end of this down to a point with my baby hammer. So this is about what we're going for. Now I can cut this out of taper and cut my handle out of taper, and we'll forge weld these two pieces together, and I'll cut this off about right in here, and that will be our mulling iron. Here is our mulling iron. So you can see that's like a 1-inch round piece, tapers down to our 3/8, and then flows on down to the handle end. Alright, here we have it. Our broom with the upset end, our mulling iron with the large end that we heat and quench our drink basically, our shovel one that we've still got to make the shovel head for, our rake, and our poker or pike. So now we have to go ahead and bend all of these ends into our hook. Then we can twist and untwist our basket weave, which is kind of the most fun part of the whole project. So here goes. Alright, forming the hooks on these. First, gonna get a nice bend established like this. Then we're gonna wrap this top part around a round section. So this is our Bic iron, which fits in the hardy hole of the anvil. And it just has a long tapered horn on it, which makes it easy to wrap hooks around. So that's what we'll use to wrap our hook. Alright, you see our hook is wrapped. Now we want to open that end up so it'll fit on our hanger. It has been a full day. We got all of our handles twisted into our basket weave. Some look better than others, but that's the way it goes when you do a group. I'm happy with them. Just need a little cleanup. We've got all of our hooks turned with a scroll on the end. And we have our shovel blank, our rake, our mulling iron, and our poker. Alright, so day 3, we're working on the feet for the fireplace set stand. And you can see I've got this 1/4 inch by 1 inch rod, and I've got a leaf forged on each end, and these will be the feet for our stand. So I'm going to show you now how I forged these leaves. So what will happen with this stand is it'll be bent half circle, and these leaves will be the feet, but obviously that's a step that you'll see here in a few minutes. Right now we're going to hammer some leaves out on the second set of feet. Closer. It's our iron leaf, and this is what we're going to forge 4 of for the feet of our Fireplace iron stand. So we've got the base for our stand finished. That's the last thing we were working on. So we hammered out these leaves out of flat stock, made 2 half rounds, ended up cutting 1 inch out of one and just welding it on both sides. So I cut a piece of 1/2 inch rod into 2 16-inch pieces, threw it on my lathe, and I drilled a 3/8 inch hole 1 inch deep. And I've got these shoulders here that go most of the way in, but they're a little bit tight. So I want to flux these 2 pieces and then heat this one and drive them together, and then I'll forge weld them. So I got my 2 16-inch pieces in there. Now I'm going to stick our basket weave piece in and just get them all warmed up enough for flux. So I got these nice and hot. I can't really brush the inside, but I can brush the outside a little. Go ahead and get some flux in there. And so now we're ready to drive that one onto the other piece. Alright. So now I'm going to take one of those halves back out. Nice and hot. Stick that in there. Alright, so I'm just going to drive it together so it bottoms out nicely. So now I can heat and forge weld this section. Alright, so we've gone ahead and got both ends of this forge welded on. This one took 2 attempts. I just had to grind off on the male part and then re-drill the female, and then I got a good forge weld on them. So now I'm going to heat and twist this center basket weave section where we have our 1/4 inch rods welded together. Alright, I'm going to get one more heat just so I can wire brush it really well and maybe do a little more straightening, but that's not bad at all. So this will be the upright that holds all of our tools. Alright, now I'm going to heat this in and hammer it down to a square shank for a mortise and tenon style joint from the top of the stand to where the tools hang, and from the bottom of the stand to the foot part that we already made. Alright, I'm just going to do the same thing to the opposite end of this, and that is the mortise that will fit into a tenon, or vice versa, for the top and bottom of the stand. So our upright is finished, and now we're going to work on the cross member. This is 1/2 inch round stock. And so far I've already drawn this end down to a point, and now we're going to neck it down and forge a leaf on here, and that will be repeated on the opposite end, and this will be punched through in the center with a square hole that will fit on the square shank we just forged on our upright. So what I'm going for now is enlarging that hole to fit on our square shank. So you can see I've cleaned up the square shoulder here and filed it to where it's got a nice crisp corner. So here you can see I've got a piece of about 1/16 inch sheet steel cut into the shape for our shovel. So what I'm going to do is bend along these lines, bend these two sides upwards and then this side upward, and these flaps here will wrap around and I can put a rivet at each corner. Alright, so as you can see it's starting to look like a shovel. And now these tabs, I'll file those round before I bend them around this way, drill a hole and put a copper rivet there, and then this will be riveted to our shovel handle like so. Alright, we're back to the fireplace set. I'm working on the shovel right now. And as you can see, I've already made some copper rivets and got the shovel attached to the handle with 2 copper rivets. You can see why I hammered that out flat now. And I've also got these ears bent around and a hole drilled ready for my rivets. And these are just made out of copper electrical ground wire, and I've hammered a head on each one. So there's a rivet sticking out. And then I'm gonna hold the rivet in place by pushing sideways on it with my thumb and get it on the corner of the anvil here. Quite lovely. And I love the contrast once we get this iron all wire brushed in black of the copper to the iron. Looks really nice. Alright, so I did do a few things off of camera, but they're very simple. I added a copper wrap at the base of each of our handles. That's just some electrical wire that I stripped and wrapped on there. And I went ahead and got the broom straw wrapped on our broom. And I did that by sticking a hose clamp on either side, tightening it down, and wrapping the wire around it.